Welcome to Neurodivergent Relationships with Dr. Kathy Marshak, where we talk about the complexities of relationships between neurotypical and neurodiverse partners. These relationships can feel bewildering, even isolating, until you learn to take back your life and navigate the differences with clarity and confidence. In this special podcast series, it's a 4-part series, and I call it Searching for Home, Searching for Myself, a journey through Hawaii, Oregon, and my evolving connections to the land and the sea. In this series, I'm sharing stories from my own life, stories about rediscovering myself, about loss and resilience, and about how our connections to people, places, and even the earth itself shape who we are. As an older woman going through a life review, I've been reflecting on what it means to belong to a relationship, belong to a community, belong to the world around us. You may wonder, what does this have to do with neurodivergent relationships? And I think it has everything to do with them, because so often in these relationships, we feel lost. We feel like we don't recognize the world we're living in anymore, like the life we built isn't quite what we imagined. That's what this series is about, seeing things with new eyes and taking back your life in ways that matter to you. Don't forget, after each episode, you can join me for the podcast After Party, a live, confidential video conference where we dive deeper into these topics together. Check the website listed on this podcast page, or you can Google me, Dr. Kathy Marshak, to find the latest schedule and events. Now let's get started. This episode, episode 3, is titled The View versus the Experience When Nature Becomes a Commodity. When I moved to my coastal home, I set up my deck furniture, bought umbrellas, and walked the beach every day. I thought, this is how you live by the ocean. But then I noticed something. No one else did any of this. Nobody had deck furniture, and very seldom did they leave their homes in my neighborhood. I thought people moved to the coast to be near nature, to breathe the salty air, to feel the sand between their toes, to hear the waves crash at night. I love that. But the longer I lived here, the more I noticed something strange. No one had deck furniture. No one walked their dogs. They had dogs, they just didn't walk them. No one sat outside, even when the sun was shining. When it rained, I put on my boots and raincoat and walked anyway. But no one else did. It was like they weren't really here. And then one day, my next door neighbor, David and Vicky, asked me to top my trees. Not because they were dangerous, but because not because they were dying either. They weren't dangerous or dying, but because my trees were blocking their view. That's when I finally understood. Some people don't want to experience nature. They just want to own the view. It reminded me of something from my time in Hawaii. Hawaiians have a word for mainlanders who come to Hawaii but don't truly engage with it. Haole. A foreigner, someone who takes from the land without knowing it. Haoles want that postcard version. They want the fantasy, not the experience. And now I was seeing it in my own backyard. David and Vicky bought a house with an ocean view, but they didn't walk the beach. They moved to the Oregon coast, but they never stood in the tide pools, never let their hands sink into the wet sand. And they wanted me to cut down my trees, not because they needed more light, not because they wanted to sit outside and enjoy the world around them, but because they wanted a better picture out their window. That's what it was, a picture. The ocean was just scenery to them, not a living thing. Not something to connect with, to learn from, to respect. It was something to possess. Once I saw it in my neighbors, I saw it everywhere. People move to beautiful places, but they never fully arrive. They want the house by the water, but they don't want to go out in the rain. They want the mountain retreat, but they don't want to hike the trails. They want the farm life, but they don't want to do the work. They want the view, but not the experience. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it, even in Hawaii. especially in Hawaii, where I had lived for several years. I think the big picture is the difference between having or owning and belonging. David and Vicky had a house on the coast, but they didn't belong to the coast. They had the view, but I belonged to the land. And this made me think about neurodivergent relationships too. How often do you feel like your partner is just watching our relationship from the outside rather than experiencing it with you? How often do neurotypical partners crave deep connection while their neurodiverse spouse is content with just being in the same room? How often do we assume that because we own something or live somewhere or stand beside someone that we're truly part of them and part of it? But having something isn't the same as belonging to it. Owning a house doesn't mean you belong to a place. Being married doesn't mean you belong to each other. You have to engage. You have to participate. You have to step outside and truly live in it. In fact, this reminds me of one other short story. When my husband Howard and I were separating and on going to a divorce, he wrote me a very sweet message and very sweet email, and he said, "You know, you have dreams, Kathy, you have dreams." And he said, "I don't have any, and I don't know why." I think that's another way to look at belonging and just watching life go by. So, thank you very much for joining me and for this episode of Neurodivergent Relationships with Dr. Kathy Marshak. And I hope these stories resonated with you. If they did, I want you to make sure you share this episode with somebody else. And do please sign up for the podcast after party where we can talk more about these themes in real time. Think about these kind of questions for the after party. Do you truly live in your environment, or are you just looking at it from a distance? Let's talk about it, and let's see what other questions emerge as you think about this topic before we all meet together for our video conference. Take care now, and I want you to keep searching for who you really are and who you belong to.